The massive ships appeared without warning above Earth's major cities. Each vessel stretched for kilometers across the sky, casting shadows that turned day into night. Their hulls gleamed with an alien metal that seemed to drink in sunlight and reflect it back as something cold and threatening. Ambassador General Kethmore stood 12 feet tall, his crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. He had done this same ritual on 47 different worlds across 17 star systems. The process never changed, and neither did the outcome. Primitive beings of the third planet, his voice boomed through every communication device on Earth simultaneously. I am Kethmore of the Zephyrian Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our domain. Secretary General Maria Santos sat in the emergency session of the United Nations, watching the alien being speak through screens that had activated themselves without human input. Around her, world leaders whispered in dozens of languages, but their fear sounded the same in all of them. You have 72 of your planetary rotations to comply with our standard terms, Kethmore continued. His words were translated perfectly into every language on Earth, though no human understood how. 20% of all planetary resources will be harvested annually for Empire use. 50% of your military-age population will be conscripted into Imperial service. All weapons technology and space-capable vessels will be surrendered immediately. Admiral Chen Wei, head of Earth's combined military forces, clenched his fists under the table. For 50 years, Earth had been preparing for this moment. Ever since their deep space telescopes had detected the Empire's expansion pattern, humanity had been working in secret. To help you understand the futility of resistance, Kethmore said, and the screens changed to show other worlds, observe the wisdom of previous incorporations. The first image showed a world of blue oceans and floating cities. The Altarians possessed advanced ocean technology. They submitted after we demonstrated our power on one of their moons. Their compliance saved 98% of their population. The next image showed a red planet with towering crystal formations. The Vegan warriors were proud and strong. They fought for 3 months before accepting terms. Their resistance cost them 30% casualties. A third world appeared, covered in gleaming metal cities. The Centaurians were highly logical beings. They calculated that surrender offered optimal survival chances. They now serve as our computational specialists. Each example was meant to show different paths to the same end, submission to the Empire. Kethmore had given this presentation so many times that he barely paid attention to his own words anymore. Your species shows promise in several areas, he continued. Your aggression could be useful for Imperial military forces. Your adaptability suggests you might survive in various environments we require populated. Your breeding rate indicates sustainable conscription levels. What Kethmore did not know was that humanity had been studying the Empire for decades. Every crashed probe, every intercepted transmission, every piece of alien technology that had found its way to Earth had been taken apart, analyzed, and reverse-engineered. Deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, in facilities that officially did not exist, human scientists had been working around the clock. They had learned to build ships that could slip past Imperial sensors. They had developed weapons that scared even their creators. Most importantly, they had discovered something the Empire had never encountered before. Resistance is not only futile but unnecessary, Kethmore was saying. The Empire provides protection, purpose, and prosperity to all member species. Your world will benefit from our guidance and technology. Secretary General Santos stood up slowly. Around the chamber, world leaders watched her with mixture of hope and terror. She had been chosen to speak for all of humanity, and everyone knew that her next words would determine Earth's fate. We need time to consider your offer, she said carefully. Kethmore's crystalline form flickered with what might have been amusement. Offer, you misunderstand, Primitive One. This is not a negotiation. This is notification of your new reality. Nevertheless, Santos continued, you have given us 72 hours. We will use that time. Very well. When your time expires, you will broadcast your compliance across all frequencies. Failure to do so will result in demonstrations of Imperial power until compliance is achieved. The screens went dark. The alien ships continued to hover over Earth's cities, silent and threatening. In the hours that followed, the world held its breath. Some people panicked, flooding the streets or hiding in shelters. Others simply continued their daily lives, refusing to acknowledge that everything had changed. But in secret facilities around the globe, other plans were already in motion. Admiral Chen received coded messages from installations that were not supposed to exist. Confirmation came from projects with names like Prometheus, Wildfire, and Defiance. Humanity's greatest secret was about to be revealed. The Empire had made one crucial error in their research of Earth. They had studied humanity's history and seen endless wars, violence, and conflict. They interpreted this as evidence of a primitive, chaotic species that could be easily dominated once their aggression was properly channeled. What they failed to understand was that humanity's talent for warfare was not a bug in their programming. It was a feature. Every conflict, every battle, every strategic innovation had been preparing them for this moment. They had spent thousands of years learning to fight, and they had become very, very good at it. As the 72-hour deadline approached, secret communications passed between world leaders. The decision had already been made, years before the Empire arrived. There would be no surrender, no compliance, no incorporation. Instead, humanity would demonstrate why they were the one species in the galaxy that the Empire should have left alone. The crystalline ships waited in orbit, confident and patient. Their crews prepared standard subjugation equipment and updated their databases with preliminary Earth statistics. They had done this before, and they would do it again. They had no idea that below them, humanity was preparing to turn their world into a lesson that would echo across the stars. Some species do not kneel, and some fires cannot be extinguished once lit. The deadline was coming, and Earth's reply was already prepared. The deadline arrived with Earth's sunrise over Geneva. Across the planet, billions of people watched their screens waiting for their leaders to announce humanity's surrender to the Zephyrian Empire. Instead, they heard something else entirely. The transmission began exactly at the 72-hour mark. It was broadcast on every frequency the Empire used, in 17 different languages, including several that the Empire believed were extinct. The message was simple, delivered in Secretary General Santos's calm, steady voice. Withdrawal window 24 hours. After that, run before the fire reaches you. The message repeated once, then the transmission ended. High above Earth's atmosphere, aboard the Imperial command vessel, Ambassador General Kethmore experienced something he had never felt before. Confusion. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever responded to his ultimatum with what appeared to be their own ultimatum. Analysis, he commanded his subordinates. The transmission appears to be some form of primitive posturing, replied his tactical advisor. A spider-like being from a world the Empire had conquered decades ago. Their response is clearly meant to appear defiant while they prepare surrender terms. Kethmore nodded. This explanation made sense. Primitive species often engaged in meaningless displays of bravado before accepting reality. Maintain position. When their actual surrender comes, we will proceed with standard incorporation protocols. What Kethmore did not realize was that humanity's message was not posturing. It was a warning. In the asteroid belt beyond Mars, objects that Imperial sensors had catalogued as space debris began to move. These objects were not debris at all, but human ships designed with stealth technology reverse-engineered from crashed Imperial probes. They had been waiting, silent and undetected, for months. The first indication that something was wrong came when the Empire's forward observation post near Jupiter went silent. Imperial protocol required check-ins every 6 hours. When the post failed to respond, Kethmore dispatched a scout ship to investigate. The scout found nothing but expanding clouds of vaporized metal where the observation post used to be. Mechanical failure, the scout reported. No signs of hostile action. But 30 minutes later, another observation post went silent. Then another. Within 6 hours, every Imperial monitoring station in the outer solar system had been destroyed with surgical precision. This cannot be mechanical failure, Kethmore said, his crystalline body flickering with patterns that indicated concern. Begin deep sensor sweeps. Something is out there. The sweeps found nothing. Imperial sensors, designed to detect any known form of spacecraft technology, could not locate the attackers. The human ships moved like ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before Imperial forces could respond. Then came the first real demonstration of humanity's capabilities. Dr. Sarah Kim stood in the control center of the most classified facility on Earth, buried deep beneath the Nevada desert. Around her, Technicians monitored displays showing solar activity with inhuman precision. For 20 years, she had led the team working on Project Prometheus, humanity's attempt to weaponize their own star. "Targeting solution confirmed," reported her assistant. 3 Imperial dreadnoughts in formation above North America. "All stations report ready," came voices from around the control room. Dr. Kim took a deep breath. They had tested the system on small scales, but never like this, never against living targets. "Initiate Prometheus protocol." 8 million miles away, the sun responded to human commands. Solar flares were natural phenomena that occurred regularly, as magnetic field lines on the sun's surface tangled and snapped. But what happened next was not natural. Using a network of satellites equipped with incredibly powerful magnetic field generators, humanity reached out and grabbed one of these flares, shaping it and directing it like a weapon. The beam of concentrated solar plasma struck the 3 Imperial dreadnoughts with the force of a small star. The massive ships, each carrying thousands of crew members and equipped with shields that could withstand conventional weapons, simply ceased to exist. In less than 3 seconds, they were converted to their component atoms and scattered across space. Kethmore watched in stunned silence as 3 of his most powerful warships vanished from all sensors simultaneously. The energy readings from the attack were impossible to understand. No known weapons technology could generate such power levels. "Status report," he demanded. "All 3 vessels lost with no survivors," his tactical advisor reported, his voice shaking. "Energy source appears to be the system's star itself." For the first time in his long life, Kethmore felt something approaching fear. The primitive beings had somehow turned their own sun into a weapon. Such technology was beyond even the Empire's most advanced capabilities. "Open communication channels to the surface," he ordered. Secretary General Santos appeared on the screen, standing in what appeared to be a simple office. Behind her, Admiral Chen and other human leaders watched with expressions of grim determination. "You destroyed our ships," Kethmore said, his usual confidence replaced by something resembling respect. "We defended our world," Santos replied calmly. "You still have 18 hours to withdraw. You cannot possibly believe you can resist the full might of the Zephyrian Empire. We control 17 star systems. Our fleets number in the thousands." Santos smiled, and Kethmore realized it was not a pleasant expression. "We know exactly how large your empire is. We've been studying you for 50 years. We know the location of every world, every base, every ship you possess." "Impossible. Your security means nothing to us," Admiral Chen interrupted. "We've been inside your network since the first day you entered our solar system. We've seen your tactical databases, your supply lines, your command structures. We know everything." The truth hit Kethmore like a physical blow. While the Empire had been dismissing humanity as primitives, the humans had been conducting the most thorough intelligence operation in galactic history. "What do you want?" he asked. "We want you to leave," Santos said. "All of you, not just from Earth, but from every world you've conquered. Every species you've enslaved. Every system you've occupied." Kethmore's crystalline form flashed with anger. "The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species." "Then you have 17 hours and 34 minutes to start running," Santos replied. "Because we're done talking." The transmission ended. In the hours that followed, the Imperial fleet tried everything they knew. They attempted to jam human communications, but found that humanity's networks were more advanced than their own. They tried to scan for human ships, but their sensors could not penetrate stealth technology based on their own designs. They prepared for bombardment, only to discover that humanity had orbital defense platforms they had never detected. As the 24-hour deadline approached, Kethmore made the decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Instead of withdrawing, he called for reinforcements from the nearest Imperial base. He did not understand that this was exactly what humanity had been hoping he would do. The real war was about to begin. The 24-hour deadline passed with no Imperial withdrawal. Instead, Kethmore's desperate call for reinforcements was answered by the largest fleet the Empire had ever assembled. Over 200 warships jumped into the Sol system, their arrival causing space itself to ripple with gravitational waves. Admiral Chen Wei stood in the command center of humanity's most secret facility, watching the Imperial fleet gather through sensors that the enemy could not detect. Around him, officers from every nation on Earth worked side by side, united by a common purpose that transcended all previous human conflicts. Operation Wildfire is authorized, he announced calmly. All units, you are weapons free. What happened next would be remembered across the galaxy as the day humanity showed the universe what they were truly capable of. The first phase began simultaneously across 17 star systems. Human ships built not for exploration or diplomacy, but for the complete destruction of the Empire, emerged from hyperspace near every major Imperial installation. These vessels bore no resemblance to the crude rockets that had once carried humans to their own moon. They were instruments of war crafted by a species that had spent its entire history perfecting the art of killing. At the Imperial Fortress world of Kepler 442, the attack began at exactly 0300 local time. The human task force consisted of only 6 ships, but each one carried weapons that the Empire could not have imagined. Quantum torpedoes that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, making them impossible to intercept. Particle beams that could slice through any known armor, and most terrifying of all, weapons that could think and adapt in real time. The Imperial garrison at Kepler 442 numbered 50,000 troops and was protected by orbital defense platforms that had never failed in 2 centuries of operation. The battle lasted exactly 47 minutes. General Vexhai, commander of the Kepler garrison, sent his final transmission as human forces breached his command center. They fight like demons. They show no mercy, take no prisoners, and seem to anticipate our every move. This is not warfare as we understand it. This is extermination. But the humans were not simply destroying Imperial forces. They were liberating the enslaved. Captain Maria Rodriguez, commanding the human destroyer, unbroken, watched through her ship's sensors as Altarian civilians emerged from forced labor camps on Kepler 442. Her crew had spent 6 hours, systematically eliminating every Imperial guard and administrator while carefully avoiding any harm to the prisoners. Medical teams to the surface, she ordered. Full humanitarian assistance protocols. What the Altarians saw confused them beyond understanding. These humans, who had just annihilated their oppressors with ruthless efficiency, were now sharing advanced medical technology, providing food and shelter, and treating their wounds with gentle care. One young Altarian, barely more than a child, approached Captain Rodriguez as she supervised the aid distribution. "Why do you help us?" the child asked in broken Imperial standard. Rodriguez knelt down to the child's level. "Because that's what we do," she said simply. "We protect those who cannot protect themselves." The psychological impact of humanity's campaign spread faster than their ships. Across the Empire, word spread through hidden networks that had operated in secret for centuries. The impossible was happening, the Empire was losing. On Vega Prime, the warrior species that had fought the Empire for 3 months before surrendering began to remember what freedom felt like. When human ships appeared in their system, the Vegans did not wait to be liberated. They rose up and joined the attack on their oppressors. The pattern repeated across dozens of worlds. Humanity did not conquer, they inspired. Every species that had ever knelt before the Empire discovered that resistance was not only possible, but inevitable when the right allies appeared. In the Empire's capital system, Emperor Vashatai watched his mighty domain crumble with each passing hour. His advisors brought him reports that made no sense. Human forces were attacking everywhere at once, despite numbering only a fraction of Imperial strength. They seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect, as if they had studied the Empire's weaknesses for decades. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "We outnumber them 1,000 to 1. His chief strategist, a being whose species had served the Empire for so long they had forgotten their original name, studied the tactical displays with growing horror. "My Emperor, they are not fighting to conquer territory. They are fighting to destroy us completely. Every attack is designed to eliminate command structures, supply lines, and communication networks. They are not trying to defeat our forces. They are trying to make our Empire cease to exist." The truth was even more terrifying than the strategist realized. Humanity had spent 50 years studying every aspect of Imperial society, technology, and military doctrine. They knew exactly how the Empire functioned, and they were systematically destroying each critical component. Meanwhile, back in the Sol system, the Imperial reinforcement fleet found themselves trapped in a nightmare they could not escape. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking without warning and vanishing before Imperial weapons could target them. Every attempt to approach Earth was met with devastating counterattacks that left entire squadrons as expanding clouds of debris. Commander Thelvas, leading the Imperial assault on Earth, made increasingly desperate transmissions to his superiors. Request immediate withdrawal authorization. Enemy capabilities far exceed intelligence estimates. Our losses are unsustainable. The response from Imperial Command was always the same. Continue the attack. The primitives cannot maintain this level of resistance. But humanity was not struggling to maintain their resistance. They were just getting started. Dr. Sarah Kim, still monitoring the Prometheus installations, received new targeting coordinates every few minutes. Human intelligence networks, now revealed to span the entire galaxy, fed her precise locations of Imperial ships throughout the solar system. With each solar flare she directed, more enemy vessels simply ceased to exist. Target acquired. Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Conquest, reported her targeting specialist. Distance 2.3 million kilometers. Fire when ready, Dr. Kim replied. The sun obeyed, reaching out with a tendril of stellar fire that struck the massive warship with pinpoint accuracy. The Eternal Conquest, pride of the Imperial Navy and veteran of a dozen conquered worlds, became a brief flash of light against the darkness of space. As news of each victory reached Earth, humanity began to understand something that changed them forever. They were not fighting for their own survival anymore. They were fighting for every species that had ever suffered under Imperial rule. They were fighting to ensure that no world would ever again face the choice between slavery and death. The galaxy was watching, and humanity was teaching it a lesson it would never forget. Some fires once lit cannot be extinguished until they have burned away every trace of injustice. The Empire's days were numbered, and everyone knew it. 3 months after the first human attack, the Zephyrian Empire was dying. What had once been the most powerful force in the galaxy was now a collection of isolated worlds desperately trying to maintain communication with each other. Human forces had severed every major hyperspace route, destroyed supply convoys, and eliminated command centers with surgical precision. Emperor Vashatai stood in his throne room on Zephyr Prime, surrounded by the few advisors who had not yet fled or been killed in the expanding war. Outside the massive windows, he could see his capital world's orbital defenses, the most advanced military installations in the galaxy, preparing for what everyone knew was coming. Status report, he commanded, though he dreaded the answer. His chief of intelligence, a tall, gray-skinned being whose species had served the Empire for 8 centuries, consulted his datapad with shaking hands. We have lost contact with 43 systems in the past week alone. The humans have liberated Proxima Centauri, Alpha Centauri, and Wolf 359. Local uprisings have begun on 17 additional worlds. And our defensive capabilities? Reduced by 78%, my Emperor. The humans appear to have detailed knowledge of every weapon system, every shield generator, and every tactical protocol we possess. The Emperor turned to stare out at the stars, many of which had once been under his control. How is this possible? We are the Zephyrian Empire. We have conquered every species we have encountered for over 1,000 years. With respect, my Emperor, said a new voice. The Emperor turned to see his chief strategist entering the throne room, her usually perfect uniform stained with soot and blood from the recent attack on the outer colonies. We have never encountered anything like humanity before. Explain. Every species we have conquered was peacefully advanced when we found them. They had outgrown warfare, abandoned military development in favor of science and culture. But humans, she paused, searching for the right words. Humans spent their entire evolutionary period fighting each other. They developed military technology not as a tool of conquest, but as a means of survival. War is not something they learned, it is something they are. The Emperor's crystalline form flickered with patterns that indicated deep thought. Yet they could have used these abilities to build their own empire. Instead, they liberate our subjects and move on. Why? We have intercepted some of their communications, the strategist continued. They have a concept they call universal human rights. They believe that certain freedoms belong to all intelligent life, regardless of species. To them, our empire is not a rival to be defeated, but an evil to be eliminated. As if summoned by their conversation, the communication systems throughout the throne room activated without authorization. The image that appeared was familiar to every being in the Empire by now. Secretary General Santos of Earth, standing in what appeared to be the bridge of a human warship. "Emperor Vashatai," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I am Admiral Santos of the Terran Liberation Fleet. We are currently 6 hours away from Zephyr Prime." The Emperor stepped forward, his form tall and imposing even in defeat. "You dare to enter the heart of our empire? Our capital world is defended by technology beyond your understanding." "We understand your technology perfectly," Santos replied. "We've been studying it for months now. Your orbital platforms are impressive, but they have a critical vulnerability in their power coupling systems. Your atmospheric defense grid relies on quantum entanglement communicators that can be disrupted by precisely modulated EM pulses. Your ground-based installations become useless once we control your satellite network." The blood drained from the faces of every Imperial advisor in the room. Santos had just described military secrets that should have been known only to the Empire's highest security levels. "How do you know these things?" the Emperor demanded. "Because we captured your chief military architect on Rigel 7th last month." Admiral Chen's voice joined the conversation as he stepped into view beside Santos. Colonel Kethara was very helpful once he understood that cooperation meant his homeworld would be liberated, rather than destroyed. "Impossible. Kethara would never betray the Empire." "He didn't betray you," Santos said calmly. "He chose his people over your government." "There's a difference." The Emperor was silent for a long moment. "What do you want?" "The same thing we have always wanted. Your complete withdrawal from every world you have conquered, the dissolution of your empire, and reparations for the species you have enslaved." "And if we refuse?" "Then in 6 hours your capital world will fall like all the others. The difference is that this time, we won't be fighting alone." The screen split to show dozens of other commanders, Altarian fleet captains, vegan war leaders, Centaurian tactical specialists, and representatives from species the Emperor had thought were completely pacified. All of them stood alongside human officers in a display of unity that would have been impossible under Imperial rule. "You see," Santos continued, "we didn't just liberate your slaves. We armed them, trained them, and gave them ships of their own. They're here not for revenge but for justice." Captain Veltar of the Altarian Freedom Fleet stepped forward on the screen. "Emperor Vashatai, you destroyed my world's cities and enslaved my people for 2 centuries. Today we reclaim our freedom." Commander Trixhai of the Vegan Liberation Forces spoke next. "Our warriors who died resisting your conquest will finally have peace." One by one, representatives of a dozen liberated species spoke directly to the Emperor. Each had lost countless lives to Imperial expansion, and each had found in humanity not conquerors, but teachers who had shown them how to fight back. "This is impossible," the Emperor whispered. "No species has ever unified against us like this." "Because no species had ever shown them that it was possible," Santos replied. "We didn't unite them. We simply demonstrated that the Empire could be beaten. They did the rest themselves." The communication ended, leaving the throne room in stunned silence. Within the hour, reports began arriving from across Zephyr Prime. The orbital defense platforms were going dark one by one, their power systems overloaded by precisely targeted electromagnetic pulses. The atmospheric defense grid was failing as quantum communicators throughout the system jammed simultaneously. Ground-based installations were shutting down as their control satellites were captured or destroyed. "My Emperor," the Chief of Intelligence reported, his voice barely a whisper. "Long-range sensors are detecting the approaching fleet. Over 400 ships representing 37 different species, all of them armed with human technology." Emperor Vashatai walked slowly to his throne and sat down heavily. For the first time in 1,000 years of Imperial history, their capital world was about to fall to an enemy force. But as he watched the approaching liberation fleet on his displays, he realized something that chilled him to his core. The humans had not come to conquer Zephyr Prime. They had come to free it. Even here, at the heart of the Empire, there were beings who had been enslaved, oppressed, and brutalized by Imperial rule. The fire was coming, and there was nowhere left to run. The siege of Zephyr Prime began at dawn on the capital world's largest continent. Emperor Vashatai watched from his throne room as the Liberation Fleet moved into position around his planet. 400 ships from 37 different species, all working together with the precision that only humanity seemed able to inspire. It was the largest combined fleet in galactic history, and it had assembled for one purpose: to end the Zephyrian Empire forever. Admiral Santos stood on the bridge of her flagship Defiance, named after humanity's first response to imperial demands. Around her, officers from every liberated world worked side by side with human personnel. The sight would have been impossible just months ago, but humanity had a gift for turning enemies into allies and slaves into brothers. "All ships report ready," announced Commander Veltar of the Altarian forces. His people's floating cities had been the first to fall to imperial conquest centuries ago. Today they would be among those who witnessed the Empire's end. "Vegan assault wings in position," reported war leader Trixie. Her species had fought the longest against imperial forces before their original defeat. Now their warriors flew alongside human pilots in formations that neither species could have achieved alone. "Centaurian technical support confirms all systems operational," added Chief Analyst Carvin. His people's logical nature had made them perfect administrators for the Empire. That same logic had led them to join humanity the moment they calculated the Empire's inevitable defeat. Admiral Santos nodded to each report. "Open channels to the surface." The face of Emperor Vashatai appeared on the main screen, his crystalline features showing the strain of watching his empire crumble around him. Behind him, the few remaining Imperial guards stood at attention, knowing they were witnessing history. "This is your final opportunity," Santos said simply. "Surrender now, and your people will be treated with the same dignity we have shown all liberated populations. Continue to resist, and we will take your world by force." "What guarantee do I have that you will honor such terms?" the Emperor asked. "How do I know you will not simply execute us all?" "Because that's not who we are," Admiral Chen replied, appearing beside Santos on the screen. "We have liberated 47 worlds, and not once have we harmed surrendering populations. Your guards, your administrators, even your military commanders, all who have surrendered have been given the chance to return to their homeworlds or join the new galactic community as equals. The Empire has stood for over 1,000 years, Vashtai said. You ask me to simply dissolve it? The Empire ended the day you threatened Earth, Santos answered. We're just making it official. The Emperor looked around his throne room, seeing the faces of advisors who had served the Empire faithfully for centuries. Many had been born into Imperial service, never knowing any other way of life. But as he studied their expressions, he saw something that surprised him: relief. My Emperor, his chief strategist spoke quietly. Perhaps it is time. You would have me surrender to primitives? I would have you acknowledge that we have lost, she replied. Not to primitives, but to a species that has shown the galaxy something we never could. That different peoples can work together as equals rather than rulers and subjects. The Emperor turned back to the screen where Admiral Santos waited patiently. In the background, he could see representatives from dozens of species working together with an efficiency that the Empire had never achieved, despite centuries of forced cooperation. If I surrender, he said slowly, what happens to my people? To the Zephyrians who serve the Empire in good faith? They get the same choice as everyone else, Santos answered. They can return to their homeworld and live in peace, or they can join the new galactic community we're building. A community based on cooperation rather than conquest. And what is this new community you speak of? Admiral Santos smiled. And for the first time since the war began, it was not the grim expression of a military commander, but the hopeful look of someone envisioning a better future. We're calling it the Terran Confederation, not because humans will rule it, but because Earth is where it began. Every species will have equal representation. Every world will have the right to self-determination. And anyone who tries to build another empire like yours will face all of us together. The Emperor stood from his throne and walked to the great windows that looked out over his capital city. Below, he could see Zephyrian civilians going about their daily lives, unaware that their entire civilization was about to change forever. But as he watched, he realized that many of those civilians were not Zephyrian at all. They were members of conquered species who had been brought here as slaves and laborers over the centuries. For the first time in his long life, Emperor Vashtai truly understood what his empire had been built on: the suffering of others. I have one condition, he said, turning back to the screen. Name it. I want to speak to my people first. All of them. Throughout the empire. Let me be the one to tell them what comes next. Santos nodded. You have 1 hour. The transmission that followed was broadcast across 17 star systems to every world that had ever been part of the Zephyrian Empire. Emperor Vashitai, who had never before appeared publicly without displaying the full majesty of imperial power, stood in a simple room wearing plain clothes. Citizens of the Empire, he began, and those who knew him well could hear the weight of centuries in his voice. Today marks the end of our dominion over the galaxy. The human forces and their allies have demonstrated that our way of governance, rule by conquest and dominance, is no longer acceptable to the civilized galaxy. He paused, looking directly into the camera. I will not tell you that we were defeated by superior force alone, though their military capabilities surpass our own. We were defeated by superior purpose. Where we brought subjugation, they brought liberation. Where we demanded tribute, they offered partnership. Where we saw resources to be exploited, they saw fellow beings to be protected. Across the galaxy, beings who had served the Empire for their entire lives listened in stunned silence as their emperor continued. Effective immediately, I am dissolving the Zephyrian Empire and surrendering all imperial forces to the Terran Confederation. This is not a defeat, it is an evolution. We have the opportunity to join a galactic community based on principles we should have embraced centuries ago: equality, cooperation, and mutual respect. The Emperor's final words would be remembered for generations. The Empire demanded tribute from those we considered lesser beings. Today we learn what it means to be equals among the stars. The surrender of Zephyr Prime took exactly 18 hours, not because of resistance but because of logistics. Processing the surrender of an entire empire required coordination on a scale never before attempted. Human administrators worked alongside liberated species to catalog imperial assets, process surrendering personnel, and begin the massive task of rebuilding galactic civilization. In the months that followed, the galaxy learned what humanity meant by universal rights. The confederation that emerged was unlike anything in galactic history, a voluntary alliance of free worlds that existed not to dominate but to protect. Each species contributed their unique strengths while maintaining their cultural identity. The humans who had started the war proved equally gifted at building peace. They shared their technology freely, established trade networks based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation, and created institutions dedicated to preventing future conflicts. But they also maintained their military capabilities, and the galaxy took note. On monuments throughout Confederation space, the same words appeared in hundreds of languages. Run before the fire reaches you. It was no longer a threat, but a promise that somewhere in the galaxy, someone was always watching for the next would-be empire, ready to reduce it to ash and memory. The Zephyrian Empire had lasted over 1,000 years, but it fell in less than a year to a species that understood something the galaxy had forgotten: that true strength comes not from the ability to conquer others, but from the willingness to stand together as equals. The fire had reached its target, and from the ashes rose something the galaxy had never seen before: a civilization based on hope rather than fear, on partnership rather than dominance, on the revolutionary idea that every intelligent being deserved to be free.